All right. So thank you guys for joining us for the Changing the Narrative podcast. And I'm one of the co-hosts, Dr. Gabriel Warren, along with Carl Benson here. And we're excited to have you guys to be listening in on a conversation that we are happy to have. So today we have a very special guest, Reggie Torbor. He's one of my good friends and we've known each other for a long time. And I'm excited to have this conversation with him because I believe it's going to be a really great 30 minutes or so that we have. So Reggie, man, thanks for joining us.
Man, thanks for having me. And, man, I always feel humbled and appreciated when I get invited to do anything, because I understand that, opportunities are everything. And for you to give me an opportunity, I don't take it for granted. So I'm glad to be here with you and also, to meet another brother, Carl. I appreciate you and looking forward to getting to know you a little better also.
Absolutely, man. Thank you. Well, I know you pretty well, and we've had a little bit of chance to do some introductions, but for the people that are listening in and they're trying to get to know who Reggie Torbor is, can you start by just telling us a little bit more about yourself, man? Tell us a little bit about some of your background, some of the things you've been able to experience in life, and then anything you'd like for us to know about your professional background.
Yeah, man, that's a lot, man. I'll try to keep it. I'll try to keep it concise, and you two dig in the gaps if you want to. Man, I'm originally from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I tell people, man, I still got a lot of Baton Rouge in me. I'm refined now, but it's still in there. But seriously, it shaped me. You know what I mean? The good and the bad comes from that place, and I'm grateful for it all. I grew up in a home, man. Most of the, I had a stepfather for some of the time, but most of the time it was my sister and I. Man, I think I was in the moment I wouldn't have been able to articulate this, but I would say I've always had the gift of kind of discernment and awareness and the ability to look around even at a young age and say, man, something ain't right about this, man. I want to do something more, and I would have these conversations with my little sister, and man, I realized my ticket to do something with sports. I realized pretty early that I was pretty gifted athletically. Man, I was blessed enough to be a really good high school player. Had a lot of scholarships, scholarship offers, should I say. And man, I accepted a scholarship to Auburn University, where I had the best 5 years of my life. I guess at the moment, it was definitely the best 5 years of my life. And man, I was able to get an education. No one in my family had ever been to college. I was able to have a great playing career that was allowed me to be drafted. I was drafted by the New York Giants, played the NFL for 8 years. Won a Super Bowl. Man, I would say by the time I was 27, I had done everything that I thought I would do in my whole life. It was pretty cool when you think about it. Where I go from there, G. So I would say after that, man. Well, I could spin off of that what I just said. I think I hit a kind of crossroads in my life of where, man, it's a strange thing to get everything you thought you wanted. Most people live their whole lives and never get everything that they think they wanted. So they chase that thing their whole life. Well, I would say my greatest gift is that I actually got what I thought I wanted and realized it wasn't enough. And that allowed me to pivot while I still had some years left. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
A lot of people, get to the end of the rainbow and realize it's a sham. Well, hell, they 75 years old. You ain't got a lot of runway left.
Yeah.
I was 27. That is probably my greatest blessing I've ever had.
Wow.
So to be able to reevaluate what's important, what's not, what is of value and what is not, what does it mean to be a man and what is not, and I can go down the list on and on and on. Blessed to have a beautiful, strong woman by my side. Michelle and I have been married, coming up on 19 years this year, 2 beautiful children. RJ and Cameron got a senior in high school, junior in high school. So I'm going through that right now. Man, I can go on and on, man. I feel like I can get long-winded, so I'll there, man.
No, I'm excited to have a conversation with you. I was really curious about a couple of things. Obviously, there's having a son in sports myself, but what motivated you? I guess from that young age. How were you motivated to continue not only going from where you were in Louisiana, but from there to the NFL? There's a lot of stuff that happens in between that. Can you tell us or tell the audience, I guess, a little bit more about how you did that? What was your motivation? What was your drive to get where you got?
Yeah. Man, I think so that is not an easy question for me to answer. And I have come through that the hard way. So let me tell you, I would tell you initially that it was something I just worked hard at. You know what I mean? But I've been in situations where whether I'm coaching or leading young men or raising young men, and that thing that you're describing, Carl, it is elusive, right? It is, I haven't figured out a way to give it to someone or teach it to someone. There's no rhyme or reason. You could say, well, it was my circumstance, it's situational, but I know people in that circumstance who don't have it, So the best guess that I can give you is it is a little nature. I believe spiritual. I'm a spiritual man. I believe spiritually the Lord gave me something. And I believe that I was in a situation where, that was forced to come out. And then I think there were some internal things where we all have to make decisions regardless of what gifts we have. And I decided I was going to do something with it. So, man, that's a little long-winded answer, but that is the best that I can do for you as honest.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
No, that's good, man. That's good to hear you say it that way. And one thing you hit on in your earlier answer was, just how you were able to, get everything you wanted, and then you got to the end of the rainbow and then realized it wasn't what, you may have thought it was originally. But one thing you did was you were able to transition, right? So you were able to not get stuck. There's still a lot of guys who get to the end of their playing career and then they're like, man, what's next? And they get stuck in this rut. So how did you do that? Like, what motivated you, or how did you make that pivot from knowing that, man, my playing days are over. Now I got to figure out what's next for the next 40, 50 years.
Yeah. So, man, I out of respect for guys that I love and care about who did not transition so well, I need to start off by saying it wasn't easy, right? Man, I couldn't have articulated in a moment. I stopped playing. I was 33. But man, looking back up on it as almost a 43-year-old man, man, I was depressed that first year. I think it was a hard transition. And it's not just the playing part. I think people don't like saying this, but I think you get to a point where, man, you just kind of overplaying ball. Like, it's like, man, the schedule, the routine, just kind of over, right? Yeah. And I was lucky enough to when my body fell apart. I had 3 shoulder surgeries in my last 2 years. So I didn't have to deal with this. I think I can still do it, right? I knew I couldn't do it anymore. My body stopped. But besides the playing part, it is I think there's some value. There's some confidence that I lost. I mean, I was a confident person. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't. I was very unsure about my skills. I was very unsure about what was next. And I always knew what was next. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, sports is a very planned, scheduled, disciplined area, and I thrived in it. But for the first time in my life, I had to do it on my own. So I think for me, what happened was I came back to Birmingham for 2 reasons. One, because I knew, my wife was from here. I didn't want to go back to Baton Rouge. But also, I didn't know what I was going to do next, but I knew enough about how the world worked to where I said, hey, I need to be close to a network that can help me. And because I went to Auburn, I understood that Birmingham was a big Auburn town, and it would be a good place for me to kind of catch my breath, So from there, man, I didn't do much that first year trying to figure myself out. Worked on my marriage, which wasn't in good shape at the time. But slowly what began to happen is I began to realize that the skills that I had worked on my entire life were still valuable, regardless of what the world was telling me. You hear people say, you're not playing ball, what you gonna do? Well, I couldn't hit people anymore. That was, illegal now. But the hard work, the dedication, delayed gratification, the discipline, the conflict resolution, those skills were extremely valuable. And I began at the same time to realize, A, they were valuable, and B, they were rare, right? Which was very different from my life, right? And because in professional sports, they aren't rare because the people who don't have those disciplines, they aren't there, right? They're not around. So I had the illusion that this was common. But when I got out, I was like, oh, this isn't common. You know what I mean? And I began to take in some, the network thing worked because I went to Auburn. I started people giving me opportunities to come speak to their company, speak to their teams, talking about these things, talking about my experiences. And what happened is my confidence began to grow. I began to make a name for myself. And man, confidence is something, man. Once it gets going and you get in the circle, you can run, and I was blessed enough to have those things fall in line for me, man. And I've been able to have people support me. I haven't done it alone. I want to give you an illusion that I did. But man, it's been a heck of a few years since I've stopped playing.
Awesome. You mentioned you didn't do it alone. Can you sort of speak a little bit more on possibly whether it be coaches or mentors or someone in your life that sort of helped you down that pathway?
Man, I would take all of our time if I talked about every single person. Right. I think it is an illusion to think that we do things on our own. And we're talking about Black men, so I'll even be more specific, especially in the Black community. This idea that we can do it by ourselves, right, without creating these networks and supporting. It's just crazy. I use a quote when I speak to people often, and I think it's useful here. Chris Carter, Hall of Fame receiver, he said this, man. He said, in the NFL, there's probably about 5% of the guys who can go play anywhere, right? Don't matter where they go, any team, any coach, you take them and they're gonna ball. 95% of the league, the rest of the league, needs two things to be successful. One, a coach who believes in them, and two, a system in which they can function, right? So one, I think that's true. And then two, the question I say is, if that's true for the greatest athletes on this earth, then man, how much more is it for people in our community that we walking next to? So, Carl, when you ask me about me, man, I've always had someone who believed in me and they coached me directly and allowed me to function in a way that was conducive for me being successful. Now, some of these people in my life, Carl, were seasonal, and I don't mean that at all, right? But my high school coach, there was a place for him, and then when I went to Auburn, it was someone else. But you look back in your life, as you get older, as we get older, and you say, man, like I was never alone. Like I always had somebody in my corner. And man, Carl, I'm just a product of those investments, man. I really am.
Right on. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's awesome, man. So, you've been able to, accomplish a lot, 43 years old, you've done a lot. And, because I know you a little bit more personally than maybe some of other people listening to this, could you tell us how you give back to your community? Because I know you do a lot of that. And, I think it's important for people to know that, yes, you've been successful in a lot of different ways, but you haven't forgot about, giving back and helping others. So could you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. So that's always, so that's a tricky question for me, but because, and me, G, right? people will take things you say and flip it, or you know what I mean? So here's what I'll say. There's 100 ways to give back to your community. How I do it is just how I do it, right? That doesn't mean that it's right. That doesn't mean that it's wrong, right? So if I can, I would like to preface anything I say with, man, this is just my way, you know? For me, the main way that I give back to my community, right, is how I carry myself, right? I don't think there's anything more important than the way in which I carry myself, right? As a husband, as a father, as a leader of a company, as a leader in my community. The one of the worst things about how we are perceived as Black men in the community is that we have to always represent the other one, right? No other race, well, that's not true. Most minorities have to do it, but the majority does not have to worry about that, right? If I have a white counterpart and we're in a majority, white company, and this person, my white friend, could be my best friend, they have the ability to act, think, behave for themselves without representing an entire race, right? Whereas me as a Black man, when I'm in a position, and I talk about seats a lot, when I am in a seat of influence, if I were to ever misuse that or fail at that, it wouldn't just be this one human, Reggie, failed. It will be, see, I told you, I gave them a shot. Look what they do with it. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
That is very negative. It ticks me off a lot, but I choose to flip it for the good. And I know that, hey, man, when I'm in the seat, this seat is not just for me. This seat is for the people who come behind me also. So, man, there are a lot of times where I told y'all Baton Rouge Reggie want to come out, but I think about the people around me and the people that I represent, and man, it 100% affects how I carry myself, how I speak, how I dress, everything. You know what I mean? So I would say that is the main thing that I do. I'll stop there and let y'all.
No, I appreciate that. I think that there's a few things that you said I'd love to dig into a little bit, because we both, Gabriel and I both work, in this space of working and mentoring and supporting young Black men. You seem to have a really solid grasp on yourself, that inner self, and clearly it's happened over time, but what would you see? I mean, it's all, it takes time, but in a sense that we're in right now with the young people that we work with, maybe one or two tips that we could give young people to say, hey, how do you start to build that confidence in yourself, that understanding the narrative that's kind of put on you, but not necessarily living up to a stereotype? Maybe a tip or a suggestion you would give young people.
Yeah. Man, we as humans, we're so different, man. It's hard to give advice for the masses, but I would say, most young people that I come across right now, I'm trying to speak for things that I've experienced. We are losing, in my opinion, this idea of something I talk about a lot, which is like a mentor or someone to follow. So somehow that has become uncool. You know what I mean? And I think regardless of how smart or talented or gifted you are, man, if you are left to yourself at any age, but especially at a young age, you probably won't be able to make good enough decisions to change your circumstances. So for instance, I will tell you, I grew up around a lot of people who were smarter than me, more talented than me. And Carl, a lot, it's not all of it, man, but a lot of the differences in our lives today are because that I chose to follow people who are willing to invest in me, and they chose not to.
Right.
And man, that seems like a very simple answer, but one, listening to people who are trying to help you, right? Just listen and just try. You don't have to do it all the time. If you would do 75, 70% of it, you'll be okay. So that's the first thing that I would say to a young person, man, like, do that,
Right. I appreciate that.
So if you had a magic wand and you were wanting to try to eradicate a misconception about being a Black man in our society, what would be that one thing that you would want to just eliminate?
Yeah. Man, that again, man, y'all ask really good questions, man. I give that to y'all. Here's why it's tough, because a lot of times, man, you hear stuff that's so stupid as far as stereotypes and misconceptions. I don't even want to give them energy.
Yeah.
I don't want to give them life by even speaking to them.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But here's what I would say, man. To something I said earlier, there'll be several points in this. One, man, like we're human, right? We're human just like anyone else, right? Like, we have our thoughts and experiences and emotions. We have our culture, which may be different from someone else's culture, but it's ours.
Right.
You know what I mean? We are individuals, but we're proud, right? I tell people a lot of time, you'll hear some of the foolery you hear sometimes and say, well, and it comes from a good place. So I don't want to dismiss this, but I hear it often said, well, I don't see color.
Yeah.
It's like, man, if you don't see color, you blind, hell, because I see color, right? Like, I don't want you to not see my color. I just don't want you to think less of me because of it.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying, right? Because we are different. We are talented. We are not symmetric beings, right? We have our own thoughts and experiences and emotions, and I would like for us to have the space to figure out life, to grow, to develop, to mature, just as much as the next person, right? I don't want to live in a society. I don't want my boys, my kids, people I love, Black people I love specifically, to live in a society where being exceptional is the standard. No one else lives with that burden, right? I want to be able to screw up a little too, right? I want to be able to figure stuff out, right? I want those same things like everyone else. That's what I would ask.
Very cool. Very cool. I know you spoke a little bit about your professional sports background. Tell us, I guess, what you're doing now and how that success is similar to your football success, but also just in general, what success looks like.
I think success for me, personally, I again, everyone has their thing, right? It's biblically, the parable of the talents, right? I think some of us have more responsibility than others. I am someone who believes, I try to preface this in a responsible way. I am someone who believes that I have responsibility greater than myself and even my family. Again, I've said it several times on here, man, like, when you sit in seats, those seats are not just for you, right? One of the blessings that I get in my life is I do have opportunities to speak for the voiceless. So with that being said, man, I think success for me will be measured at the end of my life by the people and the communities that I've helped. And I don't have a number, but I think for me, as my responsibility lies in my intentionality in it, right? And as long as I'm hustling and grinding for something greater than myself, trying to teach and offer people the same opportunities that I was offered, I think that is a part of what I define success. Now, hey, obviously, as a family man, as a husband, as a father, but I would say that most men have those same desires. But for me, mine extends to my community.
Very cool. Thank you.
Wow, man, that's good, man. I was thinking about just, a lot of the stuff you've been saying, man. And I know that, we have these questions we like to try to talk through and try to make sure everybody is, getting the purpose of what we're trying to do here. But, one of the things that I really have enjoyed about hearing you talk is, you are giving perspectives, and you're also kind of at the same time letting people know that, like, although we're talking about what it means to be a Black man in America, like, every Black man's experience is different.
Yeah.
And, it doesn't mean that the same way I experience something is going to be the exact same way somebody else, you or Carl, or anybody else. So, I mean, I like that. So if there was a way that you could, I guess, talk about what should the narrative be about a Black man in America, if you could rewrite that narrative, and I know that that's like an enormous task, but if you had an opportunity,
what you asking me?
if you could like rewrite that narrative,
what
would you want it to say? Like, if you could just rewrite that narrative about what it means to be Black in America as a Black man.
Yeah. Man, I think the narrative is not. I think we are just the narrative doesn't start with us as Black men, right? I think the narrative starts with our view of history as a country, and we are just unfortunately the benefactors of that. There are two parts, and I'll try to say these respectfully. Man, there were laws, ordinance amendments, like it was legal to devalue and dehumanize and mistreat Black people in this country. That is short of my opinion, man. That is a fact, right? It was such a fact that they wrote it down. They weren't even embarrassed to write it. So that's part one. There are repercussions of the way that we were treated. Right. I think I've told you this, G. Me and you talked about this at the house one night. I am 42 years old. I'll be 43 in January. Right. I am in the first generation in my family who was born in this country with full rights. Like, think about that. Right. Both my parents were born, early 60s, before civil rights, but right, which means that they couldn't go use a bathroom, right, if it wasn't marked colored.
Yeah.
So when people are talking about how long ago these things were, like, it just blows my mind. I'm like, right. Like I'm the, and most people will call me a young, some people will call me, my kids would, but people in this in our arena, right, would say, right. 24 is like, he's still a young man, but I'm the first. My son is the second. He's 17. Yeah. So, but when you have, it's funny. I love the name of the show, Changing the Narrative. When you have the ability to control the narrative, it's a powerful thing. And instead of reflecting back on the poor decisions of our forefathers, right, it's easier to blame the people who have been put in a screwed up situation. Right. So somehow we find ourselves fighting that, right, which again blows my mind, right? Those are the things make me very unhappy to have to defend, right? Because my thought is, I don't care what color you are, what nationality you are, man, if you're put in a tough situation, man, like, you will survive. We will all survive, right? And then you just hit a switch and say, "Hi, okay, it's over now." It just doesn't work that way. So that's one thing that has affected the narrative. Now, the other side, I would say, is I do strongly believe in personal responsibility, right? As a Black man.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we can hold those things at the same time. It doesn't have to be either or. You get into these arguments about either or. You know, man, we all talk to young kids. I know you all do. And man, like, you find ourselves having to have the conversation. Man, I know it sucks. I know it's unfair. I know it's not right. I know it's hard. But you still gotta do it. You still gotta hustle. You still gotta figure out a way. You know what I mean? You still gotta do it. And man, that's hard, but it is the reality that we find ourselves in, especially dealing with, young Black males, inner city males. That's the reality. It is both of those things that need to be addressed.
Awesome, man. Well, Reggie, I think we are getting down to the last question here. And
that went by quick, man.
It does go by quick, man. But you said so much profound stuff, man.
Yeah,
and I'm sure that there are people that are listening to this or that may watch this on a YouTube page that may want to follow a little bit more of your journey. Mm-hmm. So could you share like a way or a couple of ways that people can kind of follow you, whether that's on your social media platform or your website or anything like that?
Man, you about to show
you're not a big social media person. But
I'm not. So listen. So here, I think I told you. So this is so crazy, man. I can remember I was living in Fort Lauderdale, and my cousin was at the crib, and he was like, "Hey, man, you heard about this thing, Twitter, right?" Like, I never had MySpace page, nothing. I ain't had none of that. You know what I'm saying? And I was like, "Oh man, that's social media crap, man. That stuff, I ain't fooling with it, man. It's gonna be gone tomorrow. You know what I mean?" Man, talking about I misjudged that one.
Yeah.
But I've just never really gotten into it because I've always liked my space, man, and I think social media makes me more available than I like to. But man, if you're in business and you don't figure it out, you're going to get left behind. So I am blessed to lead a company now, Pylon Building Group, general commercial contractor in Birmingham, Alabama. And because of that, I've had to get my social media game up. But I don't know it enough to tell you the tags and all that. So Pylon Building Group, we have social media, all the social media platforms, and then my personal platforms. I'm really bored, so it's just my name, just Reggie Torbor. You type it in. You don't know many people last name Torbor, so if you type it in, I promise it'll pop up.
Oh yeah.
There you go.
Well, thank you, man. I'll make sure I put those hashtags at the bottom, man, so that it'll show up for people to just click on. But man, again, Reggie, I want to thank you for taking out the time, man, to really share a little bit about your story. And I know it was a lot you left out. You know what I'm saying? We didn't dig into a ton of it. You know what I'm saying? We just let you slide by with saying you won the Super Bowl, but you know what I'm saying? That's something that, we could have dug into that and talked about that the whole time. Yeah. But I just thank you for taking out the time to spend with us tonight because, it is, I know you value relationship. I do too. And I think we wouldn't be having this conversation if we didn't value the same relationships and values and stuff. So I appreciate you for taking out that time with us today.
Yeah.
Appreciate you.
Thank you. And hey, I want to thank you all because, man, this is good work. This is meaningful work that you two are doing. Again, man, whichever one of you came up with the name, it's a beautiful name, because narratives, again, they're important. And if you don't tell your story, then someone else will. So I appreciate you the two of you created the platform where we can tell our stories.
Right on. All right. Appreciate you.